So I head up the plant and seed supply unit in Forestry England, which is part of the Forestry Commission. So we grow trees and supply seed. So really I'm speaking, representing my business unit in Forestry England rather than the wider Forestry Commission today. So a bit more detail on what we do then. Next slide, please. So in terms of seed, we manage seed resources. So we create new seed orchards as part of tree breeding programs. And we create and manage seed stands across the national estate. We supply seed for Forestry England's own growing demands, and we also supply seed into the wider sector, both public and private sector. Next slide, please. And then at our nurseries, we've got both field and glasshouse and also polytunnel-based production. We supply about 9 million trees a year to the public estate in England. And I think Eric mentioned this morning about resilience. This is really the key word as Forestry England moves forward now, is increasing resilience across the National Forest estate. So increasing that diversity of species that we're working with, and that's quite important in relation to plant pathogens. Next slide, please. So I think everybody on this workshop is probably very aware that imports are a major risk for introducing new pathogens. Several people have already mentioned this today. Seedling imports, definitely a higher risk activity. It's got a history of being associated with introductions into the country, and ash dieback really highlighted that in the public consciousness. Those risks, they do increase if demand increases and if the domestic production can't keep up. You know, there's significant reforestation, afforestation targets from government across the whole of the UK. So if we do end up in a position where there's many more trees being imported, we can expect those risks of new introductions to just increase. At this point is really based more on my own opinion than any research, and something for discussion. Do container grown trees present a lower risk than bare root trees? It's quite important to distinguish between the two. With container grown trees, we don't have that soil associated with them, and often it's the soil which is containing a lot of the pathogens. And also the growing environment. They often will spend more time in an enclosed growing environment, so potentially that can reduce the risk of infections, but it very much depends on the pathogen you're talking about and the pathway and the behavior of that individual organism. Next slide, please. So less well known is risks around importing of seed. It's something which has really historically been seen as lower risk. Everybody's really very aware of the history of seedling imports. Seed, why is it seen as lower risk? Possibly just because there's been a lot less research done on it, and it's much more less understood what those pathogen associations are with seed. I carried out a bit of a research project a few years ago down at Alice Holt with the Forest Research Pathology team with Ana Perez Sierra, and the sheer diversity of fungal pathogens we found associated with seed, even fully processed seeds, was really incredibly surprising. So bacterial associations, I think we still have an awful lot to find out about what role the international trade in seed plays in introducing these. Next slide, please. Fire blight. So Sarah, you just mentioned this before. The UK forest nursery sector is definitely very aware of this pathogen. Everybody's used to the plant health and seed inspector carrying out their annual inspections on site. It's something actually in my time I've never seen on the nurseries that I've worked in. Possibly that's because they are specialist forest nurseries, and the production systems can possibly help to limit the risk, because we have trees that are generally grown for only about between 1 and 3 years. When those trees are ready for dispatch, we'll lift whole areas of crops, so you won't have individuals left behind. And fire blight, the bacteria doesn't survive well on soil or on surfaces. It really needs to be transferred very quickly to another living host. So by removing whole crop areas in one go, that probably helps. So possibly it's more of an issue on ornamental nurseries or forest nurseries that have an ornamental aspect to their growing, where trees are grown for much longer and the dispatching of that stock is staggered, so it gives more of a chance for the organism to transfer and carry on its presence at the nursery site. And nursery to nursery trade is a really important pathway for this. Making sure that there's good inspection of any bought-in material is really crucial. And the renewed focus on broadleaf forestry comes along with our resilience targets that might well increase incidence here. There'll be more planting, certainly on Forestry England sites and woodland creation sites across England, of species like rowan and hawthorn. So potentially it's something that we might see more of. Next slide, please. Zylla Fastidiosa. This is a really, really interesting and terrifying pathogen. It's very well understood. It was actually, I believe, the first plant pathogen to have its genome fully sequenced. The UK Forest Nursery Director is incredibly concerned about this pathogen, not least because if it is found on a nursery site, there would be a 5-kilometer buffer zone put in place. So it doesn't matter how responsible an individual nursery is. If there's a less responsible neighbor, it could cause the shutdown of a nursery that hasn't itself done anything wrong, potentially cause enormous disruption to tree supply in the UK. Imported stock is the most likely pathway. There's been several proven unique introductions of Xylella subspecies across from its native range in the Mid and South Americas across into Europe. The most famous current outbreak area is in Italy, and the devastation that it's caused to olive groves over there. It could impact a really wide range of UK forest species, such as oaks, aces, cherry, walnuts. The truth is, we don't know how many more. It's such a generic pathogen that can infect such a wide range that there's still an awful lot that are still to be found, and you simply can't test everything in a lab. It's got a really long latency period, so you can have stock which is infected, but looking at it, you'd never know. There's nothing wrong with it by sight. Even when there are symptoms, they appear very generic. It basically produces what looks like a drought wilting symptom, which is exactly what it is, because this bacteria gets into the xylem of the plant and basically just blocks up the xylem and stops water uptake into the plant. And the plants that we see problems with are those species that basically haven't evolved to have any defense systems against this organism. So it'll just replicate inside the tree, and the tree can't really do anything about it. And then you've got this really common vector, the frog hoppers, the little critter in the photo here. And it'll associate with a really wide range of these frog hopper species, which themselves are present in most countries around the world. So it's almost a perfect plant pathogen for spreading around the world. And it really has raised awareness in the sector of import risks more than any other pathogen. Next slide, please.
Chris, I'll just say that you've got probably a minute or.
Okay, I'll hurry through these. Acute oak decline is something which has been present in the UK for a reasonably long time, but is still quite poorly understood. What is the role of the nursery sector? We're not really sure. This comes back to research around seeds, seed-borne inoculum. We need to find out more to see how nursery trade might be able to help with this. But clearly, general biosecurity measures are really important. Next slide, please. Really important control measures for all of these things to reduce the needs to import plant material, have responsible nursery management, rigorous biosecurity measures, really good monitoring of forestry sites, and effective and appropriately funded research programs. The top three of those are starred because my final slide, something that can really help with those is biosecurity certification. So we heard from the Woodland Trust there about UK ISG. A bit more on plant healthy here. This is something that Forestry England has signed up to for our nurseries. We were one of the first. There's currently, well, looking on the website, 12, there might be more than that now, that have signed up to it, including most of the major forest nurseries. So this really highlights how seriously the UK forest nursery sector takes plant health and biosecurity and how committed they are to it. We get audited for that annually, and it covers the whole nursery, including all stock grown on site and all bought in and imported stock.